Hello everyone and welcome to the Do More With Your Money podcast, episode 183, Neil. Any significance in that number?
Over half a year.
Over half a year, exactly. So we've done over half a year worth of podcasts, so fantastic. So we've got a great session today, and we'll get straight into it. Power of attorney in your money. I think this is something that probably I'll learn something today in terms of understanding of what the importance of setting up a power of attorney and how it can affect you in the future. If that's not done, I'm joined by guests. All guests have been on the podcast, I think, this week, but not this week in general. So no introductions required. But Neil Rayner, Rebecca Wright, and Craig Alvant. Welcome everybody. Okay, let's get straight to it. Neil, I'll go over to you. What is a power of attorney?
Power of attorney is a legal document which enables your family members or whoever is looking after you potentially in the future to make decisions on your behalf in the event that you can't. So normally, if you lose things like mental capacity or you become seriously ill, it allows that individual to make individual decisions on your behalf.
Okay, and I think that this is actually quite important because when we speak to clients, quite often they believe that naturally your spouse can do that. And that's not always the case, is it? I don't know if you want to pick up that, Rebecca.
No, it's definitely not, but it is quite common that somebody might call in and inform us that perhaps their husband's getting into ill health and can no longer make decisions on their own, and the wife maybe assumes that she has the ability to take over, which isn't the case, and can cause some real problems actually if people haven't thought about it ahead of time. And nobody wants to think about getting ill or their other half getting ill. But you've got to also think that you can in some cases rely on the assets which you've invested for your bills. You can take a regular income out. And if you're in a situation where there's no one to make active decisions on that, you could end up in a scenario where you can't actually get that money out. So it is very important to set up a power of attorney.
It's quite interesting as well. You mentioned a good point of sometimes when you're setting up your assets in terms of your ISAs, your pensions, etc., you don't necessarily think about where it's going to come from in the future because it's you see this joint money. I do that with my wife. So it's actually quite important to do this. So what is the process of setting up a power of attorney, Craig, and how would that work?
So there's a couple of ways to do it. You can do it directly through a government website. Again, that's probably a cheaper alternative, particularly if you're a bit younger and can navigate through that side of things. Alternatively, you can set it up through a solicitor. Obviously, doing it through a solicitor costs slightly more. I think a rough guideline would be about £500. But really from there you can set it up in a manner which you want. Again, you can nominate the people you want to give the power to make those decisions and go down that route. And I think an important point is being pragmatic when you're looking to set one of these up is better. So people might think, I'll wait till I'm older to do this. Well, it could be too late. So being pragmatic, being forward thinking, actually setting one of these up when you've got time and the money to do so is probably a really good idea for everyone. In the event that you do lose capacity, you've got your affairs in good hands.
So when would you recommend, Neil, to do this? Is this something people should just get on with? Is it as part of their sort of planning? Is it something we do when we advise clients? I know we talk around having a will, etc. When would you sort of have this discussion with a client about doing this?
I think it's maybe a difficult decision to make at a certain point in your life. I mean, I certainly wouldn't be setting up a power of attorney in my 20s or encouraging a family member to do so. But I think as you move towards maybe retirement age or slightly before retirement age, I think it's a thing that you must consider because Rebecca said some very good points there, and also as well, it can be when it comes to that point and you can't make the decisions for yourself, for your other family members and for yourself as well, it can be quite a stressful time. So I would encourage it probably around that period.
Okay. And what does it, Rebecca, from your perspective when clients are calling in, what powers does this give this individual? What are they able to do?
Effectively everything that the account holder could do. So once you have that power of attorney and we've had evidence, we've had a copy of the certificate, you make decisions as though you were the account holder. You can actively make withdrawals, you can give instructions on how we invest the funds. You can make all decisions.
It's interesting because, it's something you don't want to think about, in terms of if something does happen to you as you get older. But like from your spouse's perspective, just having that control, especially, we've seen examples, Neil, haven't we, where potentially clients went to care and that money's been needed for care costs.
Yeah, there's a couple of decisions you'd probably make within a power of attorney or a lasting power of attorney. First of all, we're talking from a financial services point of view, but there's also a decision to make about healthcare. and if you were to maybe have to go into a home or something like that. So there's two very important aspects, and they're probably very relatable, because if you do have to go into care, or if you do have to go into a care home, there's the investments that may have to fund that, and then somebody has to make the decisions on your behalf with your investments, so that you can be properly looked after.
And Neil's right as well. It's not just a thing for yourself. I'm doing this, so it's more responsibility for your family members or beneficiaries to make sure they're looked after, and it's kind of that responsibility of making sure, even in the event of your demise or lack of capacity, you've got other people in place that you maybe rely on you, that they can continue to benefit, or be in a good place even after something like that occurs. So it is really important to get that in place.
It's quite important, this is Rebecca as well, is that sometimes with clients we can take action to say they can have information on your account, but if there was any action to be taken on the account, we would need a power of attorney. We couldn't do it.
Yeah, and I think it's quite important to bring that up, because I can think of a specific scenario actually where we've had an individual who had permission to speak on her husband's behalf. So if she was to call up and say, can I have the value, can you tell me when the next payment's due out, we would have given her that information, because when he still had full mental capacity, he had given us permission to do that. But what we didn't have was any legal document telling us that you could make decisions on the account. Now what she wasn't aware of is that the income cycle that her husband had set up was only lasted 12 months. His health had significantly deteriorated during a 12-month period, and when it came at the time that renewal was due, she was left in a scenario whereby she was seeing notifications that we were sending to his account saying your income cycle's due to end, but didn't have the power to set it up again, and he didn't have the mental capacity to do so.
In that scenario, Neil, how would that lady, for example, there get power of attorney? Because is that slightly different, that process now? Is it slightly more difficult because their client is unable to speak for themselves?
Yeah, and it's not automatic. So if you want to apply for a power of attorney or a lasting power of attorney, you can't just get one like that. As Craig said quite correctly, you can apply via the website. It's registered with the Office of Public Guardian, but I think it's 28 days for it to register.
20 weeks.
20 weeks.
20 weeks, sorry, 20 weeks. So you've got that long amount of time where you've got to register, and then that person may need income, or the partner may need income.
Yeah.
So you're thinking, well, I need to set one up, but then it's 20 weeks to register.
Yeah.
So that's very difficult for us to manage, and we can't do it without the power of attorney in place.
Just to add on to that as well, if you're wanting to set a power of attorney up and you're already inclined from a capacity perspective, you can't do that. You've got to be in sound mind to actually set that up in the first place.
Yes.
If you get to the point where you're not in a position to make decisions on your own behalf, you can then apply for what's called lasting power of attorney. But then after that, you've got you go through the courts and set up a formal guardianship, which takes a lot longer. You've got to set up a deputy. You've got to go through a long legal process, which is far more expensive. A lot more legality tied into that, which means that you can set up a power of attorney. If you haven't done it in due course, you can go down a separate route, but that's far more complex, far more complicated, and you've got to sign a lot of documentation, a big pack of forms to get that down the line. So yeah, again, being pragmatic, forward thinking, setting that up when you're in a position to do so is probably the big tip which I would give for anybody looking to the future, really. And
it doesn't necessarily need to be a spouse as well, does it? It can be a specific individual. I know for my granddad, my sister was actually his power of attorney, and it was the idea being that she could manage his money if anything did happen to him. It didn't put it on obviously his partner, or didn't put it on the children either. It was past the grandchildren, ironically, but that's the point, is it's making that decision. And I think the other point, it's maybe just asking the question is it worth doing it on both? So husband and wife, making sure that you both got power of attorney on each other, and how would that work?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously wise to have both partners covered. You may decide that your daughter will cover both power of attorneys as the named person to look after your affairs. But it all depends on your personal situation, all depends on your age, and it all depends on what your health is. Also as well, a lot of people look at the family history of health. If they've got anything running in the family, like dementia or anything like that, which they're likely to get, which is a really good push for you to get those registered.
Yeah, no, it's quite interesting from that perspective. And Rebecca, how would we sort of acknowledge a power of attorney? So if a client went through this process, got the appropriate documentation, how would we know as a company that was in place? What does the client have to do?
The person holding power of attorney just needs to get in touch and give us a copy of the certificate.
Okay.
So they can post it, they can send it across electronically if they'd prefer, just whatever's their preference, but as long as we see a copy of that, that's all that we need in order to action on their account.
And that's done for all time effectively
until we get
Yeah.
a different instruction.
And that's a good point. Can you change it as well?
Yes, you can, which happens quite a few times. Not very often, but it does. And I think you have to register the change to do so, but it would take a substantial amount of time to do that, not immediate. But yeah, it can be done.
Now, we talked about a couple of weeks ago doing a really good podcast on wills, and I would recommend anyone to watch it. I learned quite a bit from that. But I think, is this something, Neil, that you should do as part of your planning, which is just on a regular basis, reviewing your will, reviewing your power of attorney, and your obviously investments is done slightly more often, but how often would you expect clients to look at this?
Well, normally we review the investments every year as part of the course. We talked a couple of podcasts ago when we had the lady and the expert on writing a will, which is regularly reviewing it, and Dan was a great example of how he had recently made one and then reviewed it a couple of years down the line. So it is wise to review it every so often, and especially as, unfortunately, you're getting older and health issues do obviously become more common.
You normally find as well that when looking at this, when you're sort of speaking to sort of will writers or solicitors, and we mentioned before, it's actually quite important to find a good solicitor for a will, because it makes your life easier in the long run. But I'm Gavin Craig, this will probably be part of the conversation when you're writing your will.
Definitely, I think they should really go hand in hand for most people. It's a process which can be done by the same solicitor. So for me, it makes a lot of sense that if you're discussing about where you want to leave your money, at the same time you should probably discuss power of attorney and getting that set up. Like I said before, the thing I forgot was the court protection is what you have to go down if you lose capacity, and that's a long legality process. So again, going down that route's not where you want to be. If you can get the power of attorney and your will set up in place, you're probably in good stead then.
It's not what you want to do either, is it? I think it's one of these things. It can be a difficult time, and it's not a nice. As I said, this is a subject where you're talking potentially about your loved ones not being able to operate like in the way that they used to, and so it's not a nice thing to go through. But if you have to go through that type of court procedures, that could take weeks and weeks. In this lady's example, affect income. It's something that's it's really
it's
difficult.
probably similar to the beneficiary pension conversation that we have, that a lot of people leave it to the point where something like that event of death happened, and then it becomes a much harder conversation to have. I think being open with your beneficiaries, your family, but also with a legal person such as a solicitor about what you want to do before the event happens, and makes it much easier. And it means that everything's in place regardless of what happens in the future, whether you lose capacity or not. So much in the similar way of the beneficiary pension, you set that up well in advance, that's taken care of, and you can go and enjoy whatever you've got to do in retirement or so on.
I think this is part of the planning as a family, where we talk around sort of investments and where they are, but actually sitting down with your beneficiaries and sitting down with your sort of partner and discussing these things of actually, well, if something happened to me, who's going to take control of the assets? If something happens to me, and who's going to get these assets in the long run, and how do I want to plan that through? And that's a great conversation you can have with your advisor, Neil, but also obviously they can point you in the direction of a solicitor to get this legally set up. And it just makes life a lot easier at hard times.
Well, I mean, Rebecca's probably dealt with it quite a lot, where on her part of the team, where they've had people who want to access their investments, there's no power of attorney in place, and then, as Rebecca's just said, it's quite an arduous process to get that done, and it's really important because you might need income from that investment which is left, and at a point in time where it's quite stressful. So it should always be part of the financial planning process, but also regularly reviewed, because it's really important that if you do have a POA in place, a power of attorney, and you need to make those decisions, we can look in our system, say there's one in place, and then you can make decisions on their behalf.
It's such an uncomfortable conversation to have, and people don't want to think about it, and understandably so, but it's going to be such a stressful time, as you mentioned, if your partner isn't the way that they once were, and you're having to go through all of that. This is the last thing that you need on top of it, or that you want your partner to experience on top of it. So it's maybe a little bit of uncomfortable discussions now, can help out an awful lot
Great.
in the future.
And I think, just to sort of wrap up on the topic, it's the thing to sort of think about with your family is actually start off with your will and then go down to the power of attorney and have these conversations and get those set up, and then let us know, because that helps us as well. I think the one thing about pensions is we've talked about this a number of times, pensions, Craig, actually aren't within this state, so don't necessarily fit in the will. It comes from the trustees. So that's why the beneficiary process and adding who you want your pension to get to is equally as important.
It just falls back into ease. If it's automated, it's done, it's set in place, it makes things easy. And that's what people want, I think, especially going through anything where it involves your loved one going through a situation, whether lose capacity or indeed to die. Having that set up, having that ease makes everything a lot smoother when it comes to even paying money out of your estate or so on. So it's definitely advisable for everyone to consider.
Yeah, definitely. And as I said, I think it'll make life easier for yourselves, but it just means when we're having these conversations later on, and it comes up quite commonly for us. So I think the tip is find a good solicitor, or you can go and do it yourself if you want. I think most solicitors don't charge too much on this. Mixed in with your will, get your will done at the same time, and then let us know. So then if anything does happen, it's safe and we can take it from there. So brilliant. Thanks. Nice, quick and sharp sort of session there today, but equally, actually, I've learned some things, actually, how important that could be.
Yeah.
So when are you setting your power of attorney up, Neil?
Well, I'm pressured to do so now. So,
I know. Well, you've got a special birthday coming up soon, haven't you?
So 40 next month. Yeah. So I'll be setting one up then.
Plus that.
Yeah. Plus that, exactly. But I was thinking I'll get this in now, because you might not be on the podcast before your birthday. So many happy returns.
Thank you.
I'll not whisper the age, but
no, it's fine. I'll be approaching the big 50.
Yeah.
So
happy 50th, Neil.
Yeah.
Hope you have a great birthday.
I hopefully will. Yeah. So I'll get my power of attorney set up just before.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a present to yourself.
Yeah,
present
Or your
to
loved
yourself.
ones.
Little present to your loved one.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Great session, and thank you for listening again today. Please do like and subscribe if you like the content, and we will see you again next week. Thank you.